All right, good evening, everyone. Just to be clear, this is not the tarot card presentation. Welcome, thank you for coming. I'm Dan Murphy, I'm the president of the Olmsted Society. I also coordinate the presentations for the society. And I thought it would be a good topic, presentation topic, to have a follow-up to the 2015 presentation that we did on the undamming of the Des Plaines River. So the dam that stood between Lyons and Riverside near the Millbridge Road, near Millbridge Road Bridge, that undamming was controversial at the time. There were concerns that the river would run dry without the dam to hold the water back, and that the area would turn into a muddy swamp, mosquito infested, or people thought it would exacerbate flooding in the area. And I think neither issue has come to pass, fortunately. Tristan's predecessor was here in 2015 to present on the progress to the health of the river 3 years after the undamming, and I thought 10 years later it would be good to have an update on that. Tristan Widloe, our speaker tonight, is the Region 2 Stream Specialist for the Illinois Department of Natural Resources. He grew up in Shorewood, next to a tributary of DuPage River, which I guess was a formative experience because he was always fascinated by aquatic ecosystems. As a boy, he spent a lot of time exploring the creek, bringing home turtles, snakes, and crayfish, as well as doing the similar nature studies on trips to northern Wisconsin with his family. Tristan had what he describes as an early midlife crisis. He quit his job in insurance accounting and went to graduate school at Western Illinois University. So I guess you're still a numbers guy. It's just fish, not dollars now, right? He obtained a master's degree in biology there with an emphasis on aquatic ecology. He conducted his thesis research on the Mississippi River. Tristan worked as a biologist for a consulting firm in Aurora, where he monitored fish populations in the Fox River for the Fox River Metro Water Reclamation District. In 2011, he obtained his first position with the Illinois Department of Natural Resources, where he was an aquatic nuisance species he was not an aquatic nuisance, but he was in the aquatic nuisance species program, monitoring and harvesting invasive carp from the upper Illinois River and Chicago area waterways. In 2018, he accepted his current position as the Illinois Department of Natural Resources River and Streams Biologist for Northeastern Illinois. He's worked alongside his friend and mentor, Steve Pescetelli, until Steve's retirement in April of this year. And Steve was the presenter in 2015. Tristan lives in Plano with his wife, Amanda, and their dog and cat, Fergus and Ophelia. And no fish, I noticed.
No fish.
Right.
No,
So, Tristan Widloe.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, jeez. Off to a good start. Thank you very much. So, as Dan mentioned, Steve Pescetelli gave an update in 2015, and since then, we've had 2 rounds of what we call basin surveys for the Des Plaines River. So I'll be presenting on that. And you see Steve's name is still on this talk, even though he's retired. Steve's my, I always get choked up. He's my buddy, my mentor. I miss him dearly. He's still alive. But like the truck rides, I don't have the truck rides with him anymore. I don't have the, I'm gonna move on. But just want to give Steve a shout out because he laid the foundation for all this work, all this river and streams work in northeastern Illinois. Region 2 is what we call it in the DNR world. So big shout out to Steve, love him dearly. Moving on, no more tender moments, sorry. Just a quick overview of the Des Plaines River. It's a relatively narrow watershed, about 2,100 square miles, flows mostly north to south, and then it kind of makes a, let's see if I can use, you see the pointer on here? Yes. Okay. Flows mostly north to south, and then makes this kind of southwesterly jaunt, roughly around Lyons, as it runs alongside the Chicago Sanitary and Ship Canal, and then to the confluence with the Sanitary Ship Canal around Joliet, in the Brandon Road pool. And then this right here, that's the Brandon Road Lock and Dam. There's been a lot of talk and attention on the Brandon Road Lock and Dam, talks of putting in deterrents in the lock channel to keep, there's concerns of invasive carp, right, moving upstream. So there's talk of putting the various deterrents to keep invasive carp from moving upstream, which we'll talk about more a little bit later. But that'll also hamper the upstream advancement of native species, which I'll touch on more as well. Also, the Des Plaines is relatively, the gradient, it's pretty low gradient at about 1.2 feet per mile. There are a couple of higher gradient sections, actually right here at Riverside, about 7 feet per mile. So that's talk about the steepness or the pitch. And then from Romeoville to the Chicago Sanitary and Ship Canal, have another kind of steep pitch there, gradient. Is everybody hearing me okay? Yeah. Okay. So this is kind of zooming in then. So like I mentioned, kind of make this southwesterly flow along, and then alongside the Chicago Sanitary and Ship Canal. And as probably everybody knows, the Sanitary and Ship Canal went online around 1900 to divert the flow of wastewater away from Chicago, away from Lake Michigan, and send it downstream. And then you can see where the Des Plaines River then connects to the confluence of the Chicago Sanitary and Ship Canal, and then the Des Plaines River then flows till Brandon Road Lock and Dam, and then the lower Des Plaines. So the talk of mention of wastewater. This is the Stickney Wastewater Treatment Plant. It's one of 7 operated by MWRD, and Stickney is one of the largest wastewater treatment facilities in the world. Discharges in the Chicago Sanitary and Ship Canal. This is right around Cicero. Service for 5 million people and treats 700 million gallons per day on average. And as I was doing kind of my little information dig on the Stickney Wastewater Treatment Plant, it also employs almost 400 people. That's kind of insane to me for a wastewater treatment facility. Again, one of 7 in the Chicagoland area. So this talk of wastewater and treating wastewater, we have this issue of these combined sewer overflows, or CSOs. So these blue dots indicate all the locations of CSOs throughout the Chicago area waterway system. And then here out to the west, that's the Des Plaines, and there are 51 of these CSOs that discharge into the Des Plaines River. So what these combined sewer overflows are, for those that aren't familiar, during rain events, when there is this mixture of rainwater and wastewater that's too much for these wastewater treatment facilities to handle, this water that discharges at these various points, these CSOs, into our area waterways, which is an archaic infrastructure. So in answer to that, the Tunnel and Reservoir Plan was initiated, also known as the Deep Tunnel. Here's a map of some these various tunnels. So this started in 1975, not long after the Clean Water Act. That's phase 1. So initial service started in 1981 in the Upper Des Plaines River, which is this upper circle here is the Upper Des Plaines River Tunnel. Then the entirety of the Des Plaines tunnel system, which is all here, was completed in 1999. And then all these tunnels, these various black lines throughout the Chicago area waterways, including Calumet region down here, was completed in 2006. It's 110 miles of tunnels that have a carrying capacity for 2,300 million gallons of this rainwater, wastewater mixture. And these tunnels have a diameter of up to 33 feet. And then the second phase are these reservoirs. And of particular note for the Des Plaines River is this McCook Reservoir, which is the one in yellow here. That went online in 2017. And we had a survey, which I'm going to get into here, in 2018, and a survey again in 2023. We have some pretty compelling results to share. But yeah, just remember that McCook Reservoir. So that went online in 2017 with a holding capacity of 3.5 billion gallons of this rainwater, wastewater mix. And the idea, well, not the idea, these reservoirs hold this mixture of rainwater and wastewater until the treatment facilities have the capacity to treat it. And then it can be safely discharged into the waterways as effluent. So just to give you an idea, these deep tunnels, from an engineering perspective, that just blows my mind. I should have included a picture. There's this like boring machine that's like well, the size of this tunnel that was used to build these. Pretty incredible. And they see how big, like I said, up to 35 feet in diameter. And this is one that's discharge point into one of these reservoirs. And you could see just how big, not only the tunnel, but how big these reservoirs are. So the McCook Reservoir, that's the one that's really gave the Des Plaines a great shot in the arm. Again, went open up in 2017 at 3.5 billion gallons. It's located, well, right there. It's around McCook. Here's the sanitary ship canal, so it sits between that, and then here's the Des Plaines River, and then you have I-55. So a lot of people in this room have probably seen it, whether you realize it or not. So this is looking at some long-term species richness data. This is some data from the Illinois Natural History Survey. It goes back to 1957. This is looking at, so species richness is the number of species collected. So we're looking below Brandon Road, Lock and Dam into the lower Des Plaines River, upper Illinois, lower Illinois. And you could see, start to see kind of an upward trend in mid to late 70s, an uptick. So these are average species richness per year. And this is, again, below Brandon Road, Lock and Dam. So our data, our DNR data for the Des Plaines River, particularly above Brandon Road, Lock and Dam, follow suit with this. So going back to 1973, so this is the number of species collected in a survey. So this is total number. So 1973, we had somewhere in the upper teens. And then fast forward to 2018, and actually there should be a dot, sorry, 2023. We didn't have a change, but we're up to 64 species in the Des Plaines River main stem. So again, up from about 18 to 64 in that time period. So thank you to the Clean Water Act. And then thank you to these dam removals. Thank you to this tunnel reservoir plan, which we're going to talk about more here in a second. So these, as we all know, I think all the main stem dams above Brandon Road have been removed as of 2021. Purposes were things, recreation, water retention fords, and the effects, fragmentation. Fish weren't allowed to move throughout the system as they naturally would. Water quality degradation, and habitat degradation. And then these are obviously all the dams, and the red pins here. These are the dams moving from upstream to downstream. Some of these, I highlight the height, because some of these may have been passable at high water. These ones that are 1 to 2 feet during heavy rain events, they might have been passable by fish, but all these others, 4 or 5 feet. And of note, the Hoffman Dam at 12.5 feet, nothing was getting around that at any point in time. And thankfully, Hoffman was one of the first out with that, and Fairbanks came out in 2012. So this is just the date, all these dams came out with the last two in 2021. Some before and afters. And this might be review some of these pictures for some folks here. Kind of the most telling out of these three, anyways, that Devon Avenue. Again, that might have been passable at a high water event. It also had a fish ladder, but oftentimes these fish ladders, it looks like the top rung of that fish ladder is dry, actually. And then there's the after. Hoffman Dam. So this started in 1997. So when they first started the whole Hoffman Dam removal, and it finally came out in 2012. And this is a slide I stole from Steve. So that 15-year period, 4 governors, 5 DNR directors, 4 fisheries chiefs, but it launched a dam safety fund in September of 2012. So 2021, as I mentioned, all dams are out. Dams be gone. So 98 miles is now free flowing if you look at from Brandon Road all the way upstream, or focusing just on the first dam to the last dam, we're looking at 45 miles of river is now free flowing. So onto our Des Plaines River Basin Survey. I'm just going to focus on the main stem today. So all these green dots, these are our sample locations throughout the river. We have 14 sites above Brandon Road, and then 2 sites below. We use boat electrofishing and a net seine to collect fish. And our survey years, 1983, and then Steve was hired sometime in the early 90s, and he really standardized we got into this 5-year rotation. And so last survey is 2023. We'll have one again in 2028. That's G39. That's, where's the river? That's right, it's right here. That's here in Riverside. So, boat electrofishing, for those who aren't familiar, you have these booms that hang out the front of the boat. There's droppers that then hang into the water column, go down a few feet. It's powered by a generator, and there's a control box. We can control the amps and volts and essentially how many watts we're putting into the river. And then as fish are stunned, it just stuns them temporarily. Mortality is very low. We'll dip them, put in a live well with water and oxygen, and then once we're done with our electrofishing run, we'll ID the fish, weigh them, measure them, and put them back to the river alive. Some of the really small-bodied fish under a couple inches, we will preserve in a formalin solution and ID in the lab under a microscope, which that's what I spent a lot of my winter time doing. All right, so here's just some talking points moving forward. So right now we're going to touch on sport fish abundance and distribution, particularly smallmouth bass and sauger. And so this was note to self. So smallmouth bass, a key thing to remember, they're intolerant to poor water quality. So not only, of course, they're a popular sport fish, but they are intolerant to poor water quality, and they're a key indicator species. So finding them is good. So jumping into some data. So 2008, before the expansion of the tunnel and reservoir plan, and so before the McCook Reservoir, and then all 11 dams were in place. So this is our catch rate. So CPUA is catch per unit effort. So number of smallmouth bass collected per hour, right? So we're looking at, out of the 14 sites above Brandon Road, and also I'll mention the green, our sample sites that don't have data correlated with it, those are zeros. So we only had 2 out of the 14 sites had smallmouth bass. Average catch rate for the entire river, because the zeros count, average catch rate for the river is 0.9. We collected 8 smallmouth bass. Move forward to 2013, still before the McCook Reservoir went online. We're down to 7 dams. So we have a little expansion, especially above Hoffman. We had a couple sites where smallmouth bass, expanded their range. However, really low catch rates, and the catch rate for the entire river, again, because the zeros count with that average, is 2, and we collected 31 smallmouth bass. Moving forward to 2018, so there's 13 on the left. Well, yeah. 2018, so 1 year after the McCook Reservoir opened, and then we're down to just these 2 dams. We didn't expand the number of sites, but our catch rates, particularly these lower sites, that's Lamont Road, and then that's Isla Cache and Romeoville, and then this is Division Street and Lockport. I mean, see how our catch rates jumped up. We were really excited about this. We went from 31 smallmouth bass to 183. Our catch rate went from 2 to 14. We're like, wow, this is amazing, right? Fast forward to 2023, and we go from 5 sites with smallmouth bass, 5 out of 14, to 12 out of 14. It's just these furthest most upstream sites, we didn't collect any smallmouth bass. I mean, our catch rates, again, here's our catch rate for Riverside, for example, is 79 smallmouth bass per hour. This 17, that's Willow Springs, Columbia Woods, and that's actually kind of like a really stagnant, low gradient, not a really smallmouth bassy stretch of river, and we still collected 17. We've never collected smallmouth bass there before. And then these catch rates at Lamont Road, 310 smallmouth bass per hour, incredible. 219 at Isla Cache, 101 at Division Street and Lockport. So our catch rate went from 14 riverwide per hour to 65, and we went from 183 individuals to 626. So pretty incredible, pretty telling data. There's really not much to say in that regard. So here's looking at our mean catch rate for the lowest 6 stations, so from Riverside down to Division Street and Lockport. So there's our averages. So very, very low, under 10, under 5, under 5. And again, we were pretty excited about 2018. And then 2023, our average catch rate for those lower 6 stations was almost 130 smallmouth bass per hour. So this is looking at, this is our lake frequency for the smallmouth bass collected in 2023. And again, that's 6 years after the McCook Reservoir went online and all the dams have been removed. But we've got a great spread, you know, it got adults up to 19 inches, and most notably, we have young of the year. So these 1-2-inch fish, indicating a self-sustaining population. Because in 2018, that 183 smallmouth bass collected above Brandon Road. You know, we got a pretty good spread, up to 16 inches approximately. But notice we're missing these small fish, these young fish, indicating that these fish may have likely locked through, because there wasn't a self-sustaining population, locked through the lock at Brandon Road, which I have evidence to suggest that here in a minute. So now let me touch on our sauger stocking program, which started in 2001. So we stock approximately 25,000, let's say 2-inch, maybe like 1.5 to 2-inch fingerlings are released. I said mid-river locations, we kind of mix them up to help spread the fish out each year. This year we went up, the highest we've ever gone up to dam number 2 Woods, if anybody's familiar. That's about the highest we've ever gone up, because now that all the dams are out, because we want to help spread these fish out. That's John Mock. There might be some people in this room familiar with John. He was a member and at one time president of the Hoffman Dam River Rats, a dedicated, voracious advocate to dam removal, especially the Hoffman Dam. He worked with Steve Pescatelli, my mentor and friend, and Bob Rung was the other biologist before me. John would go out with them on some of their surveys just because he was so fascinated. I was fortunate enough to be able to go out with John, you know, when he was going out with Steve and Bob, and while I was on the invasive carp crew. And this guy's wealth of knowledge was remarkable. Voracious fisherman, you know, outdoorsman, just loved the river, loved the urban waterways. Yeah, his passion was something else. I definitely gleaned quite a bit off of him. He unfortunately passed in 2022. So this is looking at our sauger abundance. And we're just jumping to 2008. It's not quite as compelling, but nonetheless, you know, we go from 9 at 4 sites, then dip down in 2013. And then 2018 and 23 gets a little more interesting, which we'll look at that in this map form. So again, 2018, our sauger, so again, 1 year after the McCook Reservoir went online, and we're down to just the 2 dams. We have sauger at just 5 sites with a catch rate for the entire river of 1 fish per hour. 14 sauger were collected. And then fast forward to 2023, after the McCook Reservoir's been open for 6 years, all the dams are out. Not only have we expanded the range up to 10 sites, but our catch rate is up to 9, and 90 individuals were collected. So it'll be interesting to see where that goes. In our next survey will be 2028. So here's that length frequency for the sauger. I know I said 90 before. 92, 2 of those were actually collected below Brandon Road, but I've been focusing on above Brandon Road. But nonetheless, you know, again, I mentioned that these are stocked, you know, 1 to 2 inches. So you see they have a pretty good, you know, 13 to 16 inch adults, some upwards of 20. So now we're going to talk about stream quality ratings and IBI, and look at trends in stream quality ratings and IBI in response to these improvements in water quality and all the dam removals. So what's IBI? It's Index of Biotic Integrity, and that's essentially, I like to say it's a scorecard or report card for a river or stream segment based on the fish community that's collected there. So we run these IBIs for every site during our surveys. So it's based on these 10 metrics. Each metric runs from 0 to 6, and then you get a score from 0 to 60. 60 being pristine, you know, river, stream segment. 0, I've never seen a 0. I guess a bucket of paint, I don't know. I've seen, you know, some in the teens, some of the Lake Michigan tributaries. Oh, actually, let me go back. So these 10 metrics, I'm not going to go through each one, but to kind of give you an idea what we're looking at and what's driving. So number of native fish species, number of sucker species, proportion of specialist benthic invertivores. So those are the fish that eat invertebrates off the bottom, off the stream bottom. So this IBI is used to then determine aquatic life use impairment. And that's per the EPA Section 303D list, which is their impaired waters list. So this is taken from the impaired waters list. So of note, what we want to pay attention to here is this fish index biotic of integrity. So I mentioned they run from 0 to 60. We want our scores, like the EPA wants our scores, at or above 41 to be considered no impairment, full supporting aquatic life use. So remember that 41 or above. So here's then jumping into our IBI scores for the Des Plaines River. So this is looking at 2013 versus 2018. 2013 in red, 2018 in blue. There's that full support aquatic life use per the EPA. And we're moving from upstream to downstream. These are the two sites below Brandon Road, Hoffman Dam. Of note, these 4 sites above Brandon Road, Hoffman Dam, so going from Willow Springs at Columbia Woods and then to Division Street in Lockport, we saw a nice boost in the IBIs from 13 to 18. And that's largely to do with the influx of smallmouth bass. Like I mentioned, they're an intolerant species, so they're helping to drive and bolster the IBI scores. Now moving forward to comparing 2018 to 2023. 2018 in red, 2023 in blue. Of course, there's our 41, full support aquatic life use. Our mean went from just under 32 to 37.3. Not quite at that 41, but we're chugging along, trying to get there. Of note, these 3 with the asterisks indicate both a significant, statistically significant and biologically meaningful change of 10 points or more. And also, this is the first time ever that we had 3 scores above 41. We've never had any IBI scores at or above that 41 threshold. So then here's looking at our average IBI scores for each survey going back to 1983. So then here we are, about 15. And then follow the trend and then fast forward to almost 37.5. And then there's that IPA threshold for full support aquatic life use of 41. So we're trying to get there. I'm really excited to see how things play out in 2028. So I kind of cherry-picked one of these sampling stations where we had that change of 10 or more in the IBI score. So we went so this is G15. This is a EPA station code. So G stands for Des Plaines. I don't know how they come up with these, but nonetheless. Just like DT is the Fox River. But so G15, this is Irving Park Road and Schiller Park, to give you a rough idea. But yeah, so we saw this change at 13 points. So we're seeing species moving in, right? So rosy-faced shiner, smallmouth bass weren't there before. And they're highlighted in yellow because those are, I keep mentioning these intolerant species. Those are both intolerant to poor water quality and help, again, bolster the IBI score. Carp, we saw a decrease in carp numbers. And one of the metrics is actually for tolerant species. So seeing a decrease in species that can handle poor water quality. But so carp are on the downslide at that site. Blunt-nosed minnow, we didn't have any before. Spot-tailed shiner. So the number of species is also one of the metrics for the IBI. So we have a couple new species here. Log perch I probably should have highlighted because they're one of those specialist benthic invertivores. So it went from 1 to 10. So just kind of give you an idea of what drives and how this IBI can change at a given site. And I mentioned rosy-faced shiner. That's another one that we saw an expansion of. So 2008, no rosy-faced shiners. Again, this is an intolerant species. 2013 up to 39, that's at 4 sites, 21 at 3 sites, and then 2023, we had 294 at 11 sites. So pretty compelling stuff. So this is looking at those 10 metrics for all 16 sites, so including the 2 below Brandon Road. So these are the average metric scores for all sites. So 2023 in red, 2018 in blue. As you can see, 2023, all our IBI metrics went up across the board. But where we're lacking, number of sucker species, and we really only see white suckers and spotted suckers. They're tolerant sucker species, like we need to start seeing some like red horse species up here. And same goes for these other metrics. This is largely your suckers, your intolerant sucker species, and then like darters. This is a orange throat darter, which is in the perch family. These are the kind of species that would help bolster especially these 4 metrics that were kind of lacking. And in order to get these species up this way, they would need to pass through the Brandon Lock. And again, we have evidence that fish do use the Brandon Lock. Which, good time to talk about dams. And some of this is going to be a review for people that were here in 2015, and if you weren't, then this is some fresh information. So dams, so the system-wide effects of dams, right, they impede and keep fish from doing what they would naturally do, which is move up and down throughout the river, spawning migrations, feeding migrations, looking for winter habitat, summer feeding. So this is taken from Santucci and Gefford, Max McGraw Foundation. This was done in the early 2000s. This is specific to the fox, but however, the data still, it's useful in this setting. So they looked at every Fox River dam above, 2 sites above, 2 sites below. So upstream, impounded, mid-segment impoundment. So those are 2 above the dam, then they had 2 below the dam. They looked at everything from water quality to the sediment to aquatic insects to fish. I mean, it's the most thorough. That report is like this thick. It's incredible. So like here, this is the average QHEI score. It's a habitat quality index. So these are averages, right? So they have those 2 sites above the dam and then the 2 sites below the dam. So this is the average for all 15. So the take home here is that the habitat quality index is substantially higher in the downstream free-flowing section versus the dam section upstream. Similar, again, taken from Santucci and Gefford. This is looking at the number of species richness, the abundance of all fish, looking at the number of intolerant species, touched on that quite a bit, and then also catchable size sport fish. Again, the big take home, these numbers are considerably higher in the free-flowing sections below the dams versus in the impounded sections upstream. So these are all the dam removal projects that have been completed in northeastern Illinois. Hopefully those pins are all showing up in the last 30 or so years. So 38 projects have been completed, 12 related to DPR, Des Plaines River. So as I've mentioned, we have the 11 main stem dams, and then there's 1 tributary dam, CV Creek, that I'll talk about in a little more detail here in a minute. But over 500 miles of river and streams have been reconnected due to all these removals. So talk about these dam evaluations. This was something done prior to my tenure, but again, it's really useful information, very telling. So these are the 5 sites that they looked at the fish community while the dam was in place. Then the dams came out, and then they assessed the fish community again in that same former dam pool. So CV Creek, which in these graphs, they call it, Steve named it golf course, just to confuse me but anyway, because there's a golf course there apparently. But anyway, CV Creek, Hoffman Dam, of course. And then the other 3, these are related, these are Fox River tributaries. That River Road, Blackberry Creek, that's probably a couple hundred yards upstream of the Fox River. And this is just that, that map I showed earlier of all the dam projects. This is kind of giving you kind of perspective as to where that CV Creek and Hoffman Dam are in relation. So again, you've seen this Hoffman Dam before and after. Came out in 2012. Blackberry Creek, I'm not going to go through all these, but Blackberry Creek, kind of another tall dam. Just kind of want to show you what it looked like. And it says it was first notched, slowly let the sediment flow out. And that sediment, that's a lot of things people don't understand, that downstream sediment movement is controlled. They'll notch it and let the sediment kind of slowly make its way, instead of just like blowing it out and just, letting everything go wild. So that's what it looks like shortly after the dam was removed. This is in process. They have actually the water diverted over here. And then that's pretty close to what Blackberry Creek looks like current day. So this dam removal evaluations just looked at 3 metrics. Again, that's species richness, the number of species, that catch per unit effort, number of fish per hour, and then, of course, our IBI, used a couple stats to look for statistical significance. So we have before the dam removal in blue, and these are averages, because most of these were sampled. One of these was only sampled once each, before and after, but the majority of these were sampled multiple times, so these are averages or means. But you can see our before removal species richness, and then after, it goes up in every instance. These stars indicate a statistical significant difference. And then 2022, so River Road, that's a Blackberry Creek, part of the Fox River Basin. Went back there in 2022 and we gained a couple points. I'm sorry, a couple species. I'm jumping ahead to the IBIs. Here's our catch per unit effort, number of fish collected per hour. Again, went up in every instance. This River Road absolutely exploded. And again, this is an average. Went from under 100 fish per hour to almost 2,000. Pretty incredible, yeah. And that has a lot to do with the downstream recruitment source, because that Fox River in Yorkville there is the IBI actually in 2022. So we have a main stem site there in Yorkville. And the IBI there was in the mid-50s. So to give you an idea, it's a really good downstream recruitment source. These fish are just kind of knocking on the door of that Blackberry Creek Dam. And they succeeded. So I took out that Blackberry Creek Dam to kind of, have kind of finer resolution, take a closer look at these other 4. But again, you can see our catch rates per hour went up in every instance. And then on to our IBIs. Again, went up in every instance, some more dramatic than others. And these two have the biologically and statistically significant. The Hoffman and YWCA is that one of the Fox tributaries had a biologically meaningful and statistically significant difference. And again, I made it back to River Road as part of the Fox River Basin in 2022, and we jumped up from 40 to 46. And you see prior, it was down to an IBI of 30. So yeah, we're not all at 41, and some of these are on my to-do list, but I'm a lone wolf now, so I'm trying to get back to some of these and see where we're at current day. So here's a table for all that. I won't bore you with each line. Just draw your eyes to these averages or mean. So our species richness, or the number of species, went from 8 on average to 22. Pretty remarkable. Our catch rate went from 80 to 612 fish per hour. I know River Road drove a lot of that, but still, like you saw in the bar graph, they went up in every instance. Then our IBIs went up from 22 on average to 33, which is, again, that statistical and biologically meaningful difference. And I realized as I was going through this River Road, that should actually be a little higher. So it'll probably be a little higher than an 11-point difference. This is just showing some of the, this is Brewster Creek, again, one of those Fox tributaries, but just showing some river fish that moved into Brewster Creek after the dam was taken out. This is that Blackberry Creek, or River Road as it was indicated as, indicating these two, a shorthead redhorse and quillback carpsucker moved above Blackberry Creek and made a spawning run for the first time in 170 years. And then Longnose Gar moved in from the Fox River above that former dam, never, collected Longnose Gar above that dam prior. Here's these shorthead red horse spawning nests above that former dam. All right, so what's next for the Des Plaines River? So a big positive, the McCook Reservoir is going to increase its capacity to 10 billion gallons in 2029. So up from 3.5 to 10 billion gallons of this mixture of rainwater and wastewater, that it's held, like I said, in this reservoir till the wastewater facilities have the capacity to treat it, thus keeping it out of the waterways. Big negative, Brandon Road Lock and Dam, they want to put in all these various deterrents to keep invasive carp from moving upstream. But the issue with that, it's also going to block native species and, as it says here, limit further recolonization and restoration of the upper Des Plaines. And I don't have the exact number, but so we have an invasive carp crew that I was on prior to my time as river and streams biologist, and we've hundreds of hours of electrofishing, I don't know how many hundreds of miles of commercial gill and trammel net, all these various federal agencies. We spent so in Chicago looking for invasive carp, and I think the number's 3 that's been collected. Just to give you an idea, there's some rogues that have made it up there, but not in any numbers of consequence. But nonetheless, this redundant system of these deterrents it seems very much bound to happen. So how do we know that fish use the lock chamber and move from downstream? So this is looking at the frequency of upper Des Plaines River captured fish passing through Brandon Road Lock based on what's called fin ray microchemistry. This is a study done by Southern Illinois University. USGS had a part in it. Steve Pescatelli had a part in it. I went out and helped with some of the sampling. Anyway, collected fish from above Brandon Road and looked at this strontium-calcium ratio in their fin rays. Every waterway has a different strontium-calcium ratio, so you can identify where these fish came from based on the ratio of these elements. So the short end of it is 10% of bass collected, so you just broke them down into these 4 groups, 10% of the bass collected were found to have originated from downstream. When I say downstream, Kankakee River, upper Illinois, lower Des Plaines. Same with catfish, 34% were found to have originated from downstream of Brandon Road. 28% of Caddisomage, which are our sucker species, originated from downstream, and then gar, 19% of which. So there's evidence, and this is a peer-reviewed journal article, that fish do use the Brandon Road Lock to move upstream. But back to these deterrents, if this does happen, it's going to block the movement of these species and, again, the restoration of the upper Des Plaines, as we have seen these improvements in water quality, which I can only assume is going to continue to improve with time. So with that, I'll take any questions. I don't know if my email address is showing up, tristan.widloe@illinois.gov. I don't know if you could see it. That's Steve and I. My wife took this photo. We went out for our birthdays last year. Of course, we're both Scorpios, and our birthdays are like 3 days apart. He saved, this is an email I sent him. What am I? I'm 48. I sent him this email when I was like 28, 29, when I saw him give a talk at a conference. And I sent him the whole hello, Mr. Pescatelli. My name is Tristan Widloe. I'm a graduate student at Western Illinois University, blah, 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 blah. And he saved it and laminated it, and he took it out. I was like, oh my God, don't make me cry again. But yeah, so anyway, this guy. And more importantly, he wrote he's got a field guide. So I have no skin in this game. My name's not on, I think I might be in the acknowledgments. But he has a field guide out. He wrote with 2 other biologists, Fishes of the Chicago region. You can get it at University of Chicago Press, put it out. That code, I think at one point knocked off a couple, certain percentage or something. But anyway, this thing is awesome. So anybody that likes to nerd out on field guides, which I'm sure a lot of people here probably do, as much as I do, this thing is awesome. So anyway, just a shameless plug. Again, I get nothing from this. So this is just, how cool is that? So anyway, with that, I'll take any questions. That's all that I have. Thank you.
If you'll repeat the question.
Sure, sure.
So.
Are there any species of fish that are considered invasive in the Des Plaines River?
Yes. Round goby. And I think that's common carp, but they're, as we say, naturalized. But yeah, round goby. And that's the one, they're kind of spreading out a little bit. But they also are good smallmouth bass food. So hopefully they'll balance each other out. Oh, and I'm sorry. The question was, are there species of fish considered invasive in the Des Plaines River? But yeah, round goby.
If the river quality goes above that 41, does that mean that people could use the river, like actually wade in it and splash?
That actually does tie into, so there's a wadeable, swimmable mandate. I might have to get back, I don't want to say the wrong thing, but.
I'm asking about people, not fish. So.
Yes, yeah. No. There's a swimmable, wadeable mandate. I don't want to give you the wrong answer. I could definitely get back to you on that. But yes, it's definitely, but we'll be trending in the right direction for sure.
You mentioned the Fairbanks Dam. Where was that located?
It was a little lowhead dam just downstream of Hoffman. Yeah, I wasn't really. Yeah, I didn't really know much about it myself until I started. Yeah, it was only. Yeah, that was only, I think, a couple feet tall. Yeah, it was a little one. Yeah, but that came out. I think it came out before Hoffman, but same time.
So there are obviously a lot of positive effects by removing the dams. Were there any negative effects to, I don't know why we put the dams there in the first place.
So and largely, that's the reasons were just kind of archaic. Recreation. Fords. So fords is a way to drive or passage over a river at low water. So we don't really want people doing that anyway, destroying the substrate. Fords is one of them, water retention and recreation. People, if anything, recreation will be better. Fishing is clearly better. Canoeing, kayaking, you don't have to traverse dams anymore. I'm biased, but I'm a big fan. The data is the data. So no, nothing negative as far as I'm concerned.
Yes, the Hoffman Dam, one of the iterations of that, or earlier iteration, was for a sawmill on that location. And then Hoffman built his pleasure garden with the Hoffman Tower, and that was to form a boating lagoon. And I think the last dam was installed by the Army Corps of Engineers, and I'm not sure what the 1954, I think.
2012 it's gone.
Gentleman in the back.
Has there been a commensurate increase in waterfowl using the river as there's more fish to feed on?
That would make sense. I don't track waterfowl.
Government agency, that sort of thing.
Yeah, we have a heritage division. We also have a heritage and a wildlife division that would be interested in that kind of information. And you're making a very good point that we should probably talk to each other about some of this stuff. So.
Not calling on the carpet.
Yeah, no. That's a great question though. I don't. Yeah, it's not something I track, but those are some folks I could check in with though for sure.
Gentleman in the back row.
I was curious, how big of a threat would you say that like the big head and silver carp are? Because you were kind of saying like you only caught a few of them like in all the studies and everything, and then with the project to like try to keep them from moving up the river, like being somewhat excessive in a sense, like what is the real threat from them in this area?
That's so we have there's that, the electric barrier in Romeoville, which that's actually above. It might make sense if it's actually above the confluence, so where the Des Plaines flows into the sanitary ship canal. So that dispersal barrier. Bear with me a second. Okay, get back to slideshow. Current slide. Likes being on this book. Yeah, so yeah, that barrier's in Romeoville, which is up. It's above the confluence. So, could Asian carp? So you're probably asking, can they lock through and make their way up the Des Plaines River?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, if there's much risk of that at all. Or...
I mean, we have and I've mentioned the effort put in above that electric dispersal barrier in Romeoville, somewhere in this area. We also have a tremendous amount of harvest that takes place downstream and below Brandon Road. In the Dresden Island Pool, in the Marseilles Pool, in the Starved Rock Pool. I mean, and actually, my brother leads the invasive carp crew. We like to keep this in the family. But they remove over 1 million pounds a year of invasive carp. So even the invasive carp that because they do find some below Brandon Road, that's the Dresden Island Pool. They're not, and I was on that crew. They're not really like knocking on the door of Brandon Road. We'll find a smattering here and there, but actually, as I'm talking about it, habitat. They really like backwater areas, and there's really a limited abundance of backwater areas. Not until you get down to like the Marseilles Pool. So that's a kind of a big qualifier. They like those backwaters for feeding and just kind of hang out there. So there's that. And again, like I said, all the harvest that takes place downstream should ultimately just keep them at bay. I mean, it has all these years. So could a rogue one make its way up? But yeah, I don't know that we're going to ever get any numbers that we'll need to worry about.
You mentioned the fish sampling was really high around Herndon Park on the Des Plaines River relative to a lot of the other samples. Any idea why?
That IBI score?
Why was it so much better? Was it really horrible there one time or something?
Yeah, I guess let me.
Obviously, that's looking a good horse in the mouth. I mean, it's a good thing.
Right, no, absolutely. No, it's a great question. Like I said, I kind of cherry-picked that one because that was a really good one. Where are we at here? Yeah, I mean, this one just kind of might have been a perfect storm. Like I said, we had so carp fall into that tolerant species category, and we had almost 40 carp, so we knocked that back substantially. We had some species move in that weren't there because the number of species is one of the metrics. Yeah, it was really low at 24, so I mean, it was kind of begging to. I guess I don't really have a much better answer than, it was just kind of a perfect storm because it was such a low score to begin with. And then we had, some new species move in. All these smallmouth bass and all these rosy-faced shiner, like I said, which are intolerant species, which is another metric. Yeah, I don't know. Like, there's nothing, like, if you're wondering, like, what's, you know, is there anything unique about that area or anything to that effect? I don't think any more, you know, because we really hammer home, you know, Riverside and downstream of Riverside because it has a steeper gradient. And the smallmouth bass, you know, I mentioned how downstream of Riverside, you know, at Lamont Road and some of those sites had those insane catch rates. Yeah, this G15, no, it's kind of a more stagnant.
Are northern pike native to this area too?
Yes.
The river?
Yeah, yeah.
On Salt Creek last year, I think they pulled out the dam by
Yes.
Brown Mill.
Yep.
Is there a similar effort going on in Salt Creek as is going on in the Swing River?
As far as dam, so a lot of that has to do with ownership. But yeah, I know, like, who owns the dam. That's always a big issue. Yeah, I know that was it the not the nature conservation. I'm forgetting their name right now. The folks that were heavily involved in that, but yeah, we actually had no part in that one, and I can't speak to the other dams on Salt Creek at this point. But Conservation Foundation, they were heavily involved in that removal.
When you say ownership by municipalities?
Yeah, and that's the thing. These dams, you know, sometimes they're state-owned, sometimes they're owned by the city, sometimes they're owned by the county, and that always, or oftentimes, muddies the water, pun intended. But
is it safe to assume, based on this great experiment of IDI, that the method you were using to control some of the sediment blowout prevented there from being, you know, exposure to benthic organisms from contamination down there?
maybe repeat that again.
So I'm just thinking about sediment
Yeah.
and the impact of when you remove the dam, the sediment that's settled in.
Mhm.
You know, you said you were gradually opening these
Yeah.
dams, you wouldn't get a big sediment blowout.
Right.
Does that help reduce the chance that you're uncovering a lot of, you know, maybe legacy or toxic sediment that's below? Or so, and the fact that we're seeing this great IBI indicates that the contaminated sediment is not an issue for the benthic organisms?
That's a really great question. Where's an engineer when I need one?
We couldn't hear the question.
Oh, I'm sorry. So she's wondering about the contamination of the sediment, essentially, because, you know, some of these sediments have been there for God knows how long, and they do, you know, can collect. Thank you. Can collect, you know, toxins in the substrate and whatnot. So I think the question is that impacting, or how is it not impacting? Or?
Yeah, I mean, based on what you're seeing.
Yeah, right.
It doesn't seem like it was an issue, but.
Right, no.
Was that just luck?
No, that's a great question.
Was that because of the engineering aspect?
That's a great question, and I don't know if they assess that stuff beforehand, because again, there's a lot of engineers involved. We have an Office of Water Resources, so we do this dam removal.
I'm not familiar with the, you know, the history of industry along the river, so I work more on.
Yeah, I mean, given the urban, you know, nature of the watershed, I mean, yeah, it wouldn't be unusual to expect there to be some contamination in the sediment.
But it's obviously not enough to impact the benthic food source.
Good answer. No, that's a great question. Yeah, again, given the urban nature of the watershed, you would expect some contamination in the sediments, but I can reach out to our Office of Water Resources, because I'm sure they look into that stuff, because they're heavily involved. They're engineers in these dam removals, so I can check in with those folks on that. You guys are getting the wheels turning. I need a pen. I need a pen.
Thank you.
Yeah, actually I do. Thanks. Yeah.
Is it my turn?
Yes, it's your turn.
I do have a comment. I'm not a biologist, I'm not an engineer, but in the years before the dam came out, you know, the 10 preceding years, there was a lot of discussion about whether the dam would be removed or if it would be notched. And my recollection was that the amount of sediment that was there, the dam was notched and not completely removed because they wanted the sections that remained to hold back toxic sediment that was in the river, that it would have been, I guess, astronomically expensive to actually dig all of that sediment out and ship it to some, you know, Superfund toxic waste place. And that was the reason why it was left there, that they thought it would hold back the majority of the sediment. So I don't know how successful that was, but I believe that was the discussion before the dam came out, and the Army Corps made the decision that they were notching it to hold back sediment.
Because I remember that was more of a concern about Riverside Lawn had wells. So that was more of a concern that Riverside Lawn was using wells for the drinking water. And that was the major concern with taking the dam out of it.
Oh,
Soon
more
there was
about
talks about the
suspended
sediment.
solids or?
Well, there was talk about the sediment issue, but I don't think that was the main driving concern. It was the drinking water in Riverside Lawn, which led to the whole taking it out of Riverside Lawn because that was an unpleasant situation to worry about. That didn't have 20-some houses there. So again, that's the engineering of it. There were a lot of things that were discussed at a lot of meetings. But the drinking water, I remember that being a really critical issue for Riverside Lawn. Unincorporated, no police service per se, and then they had drinking water from wells.
Okay.
And now those houses are gone.
Yeah.
Those houses are gone.
Yeah, it was
The
Riverside
county,
Lawn, right?
yeah, but the county bought those houses back.
The county
You know,
bought
they
the houses
restored
back.
them, yeah.
And that was also the issue with the sediment, that brought them up down. Riverside Lawn was the real question mark in taking the dam down, as far as I remember.
Okay. Now you're educating me. I mean, yeah, so this was well before me.
John Mack, the president of the Hoffman Dam river rats that you referenced earlier, he had always told me that a lot of the problem with the wells in Riverside Lawn was that they weren't deep enough. They only went down about 40 feet, and some of the wells were not very good.
Yeah.
But most of those houses are gone now, but it was not out.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Brandon Dam, does it still have electricity that goes to the city of Chicago at all? Because that was the reason why it's made, right?
Brandon Road locks are just part of the navigable, you know, to maintain depth for barge traffic. Because we have to maintain, what is it? I think, is it 9 feet the Army Corps maintains for navigation purposes?
How far up the Des Plaines River do barges travel? Can they travel?
Just, they don't go, the confluence at Chicago Sanitary Ship Canal, I mean, they can't, it's so high gradient and rocky there. Yeah, no, they stay in the Chicago Sanitary Ship Canal. Yeah. And then to the Lockport Dam.
So maybe you referenced this, but I'm not a fisherman, so I don't know. Along the river, is there any stocking of fish, or is this all natural growth of the river, just in species?
So I mentioned the sauger we stock. Roughly 25,000 a year on average at a few sites. The smallmouth bass, apparently years ago, they attempted to stock and they just didn't take. And now we're seeing, again, what looks like them moving upstream. But as far as other stockings, yeah, we just do the sauger to kind of provide another sport species. So all these other just, naturally sustaining.
Was there any other species stocked during your?
No, just again, some years ago, yeah, smallmouth bass. And I mean, this was, I don't know the exact date, this well before my time, I guess they They didn't take. Yeah, they didn't take. And that.
It's only Sauger that it's.
Yes.
Going on right now is only Sauger.
Yep. And then, as the Brandon Lock, moves further to completion, and who knows, I might be retired by the time that's done. But there's talk of, because of this issue of blocking native fish passage upstream, talk of stocking some of these species that I've mentioned that, someday probably will make their way upstream, but if we block it off, at the lock channel. So there's talk of stocking eventually to add some of these species that aren't present. So we'll see where that all goes.
Any other questions?
Will this presentation be posted?
It's being recorded by Riverside TV, and it'll be available in a few days.
Can you mute my Misty moment at the start there? Oh, sure.
Well, first of all, thanks to Tristan for coming tonight.
Thank you.
Special consideration in that he drove from Plano in rush hour traffic to get here. But just a few notes before I let you go. So we're done with our landscape work days for the year, and we're done with our walking tours. But we have our annual public meeting coming up in January, Friday, January 16th. That'll be at the Village Hall. You're all welcome to attend. Our speaker, I won't call him out right now, but he's here tonight. Our speaker at the annual public meeting will be David Oppenheimer. He's a resident of Riverside, and he's also president of Oppenheimer Gallery, located in Chicago. He's going to be presenting from Catesby to Audubon, American Natural History Art, and Olmsted's Vision of Landscape. So his talk is going to connect the work of 18th and 19th century naturalists and artists like Mashaw, Bartram, familiar names if you live in Riverside, and Audubon. And I mentioned another name that's also a reference in Riverside, though the initial letter is different. So those naturalists and artists will be covered, and their studies and how those relate to Olmsted's philosophy of landscape and design. So that other naturalist was Catesby, who we know as Gatesby here in Riverside. I'm not sure if that was a clerical error or the developer thought that would be a more appealing name, but whatever the reason, Catesby is also memorialized in Riverside. So David will also, besides a slide presentation with the artwork of those naturalists, he'll also be bringing actual prints and other historic artifacts to the presentation. So anyway, I hope you can make it for that. This Friday, January 16th at the Village Hall. All are welcome. Food and drink will be served afterwards. So thanks to the library for their help tonight in co-sponsoring this event, particularly Diane Silva, who may be down at the tarot card event, but Diane is always helpful, and Brent Bowles. Thanks to Riverside TV for recording us, and thank you all for coming. Have a good night.